Welcome into the ArtGibbs Sports Business Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to pose a question to you. What is it that drives the best performers in our society? Is it winning? Is it being the best? Is it beating the competition? These are all questions we always ask. Is it that they love it so much? Steve Jobs said, you've got to love it. It's so hard. You've got to love it. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, they loved winning. They wanted to beat the competition. Lance Armstrong wanted to win, wanted to beat the competition, wanted to see everyone else lose. But could it be something else? Could it be the day-to-day? Could it be the grind? Can it be seeking the inches, the 1,000 little cuts on the way to perfection? Could it be that process that drives you? Could it be the process? The most successful coach of all time in college football, unarguably, is Nick Saban. And some may say it's by a country mile. He's won year after year, maintained the highest level program, and we are lucky today to be joined by author John Talty, who wrote an in-depth book on the leadership secrets of Nick Saban. So without further ado, let's go over to the interview where we dig in to Nick Saban, the leadership secrets that he may possess. Enjoy. And we're joined here by John Talty, the author of Leadership Secrets of Nick Saban, perhaps, unarguably the greatest coach of all time. So I guess we'll just start with what led you to write this book, maybe a little of your background, how you got to that point.
Yeah, so I've covered Alabama in some regard for 8+ years now. I've covered the SEC for even longer than that. And, covering Alabama for a while and talking to, all these different, coaches and players and recruits over the years, people over and over again would tell me about how Nick Saban runs his organization like a business. And there have been countless people who have told me, if you put him in charge of a Fortune 500 company, he would be great, all these different things. And so I've always had this fascination about looking at how much of that is true. Is it just the fact that he maybe runs it a little better than the average college football program, and that's why we talk about business? Or is there some actual business strategies and philosophies behind what he's doing? And so that was kind of the basis of the book, was just basically doing a deep dive into how Nick Saban has had success throughout his career, but also maybe most importantly, why he does what he does and how the things that he does are translatable outside of college football.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's kind of like an age-old debate. People are saying, could you replace a college coach with a CEO of another company, or is it better to go, get the X's and O's guy, but maybe they can't run this huge organization? So maybe on that subject, maybe if you could talk a little bit about Alabama football, what that organization looks like to people on the outside, how many people are there? Is it a monarchy, or how is it set up sort of, and what is it in terms of its sort of company size, I guess you'd say?
Yeah, Saban is clearly the king. There's no doubt about that. And it's all built around how he does things. But yeah, it's actually a pretty massive organization when you think about it, because you have 120 plus players, right? That's just one operation. And you've got more than 100 people who are working, whether that's coaches, analysts, they've got strength and conditioning people, dietitians, there's just all of these different people. And so when you think about it, that's pretty good amount of people that you're managing. The football program generates upwards of $100 million in revenue every year. So I think sometimes we think about college football as and as I wrote this book, some of the people ask me, it's kind of all right, well, what exactly are we talking about here? It's this is actually a big business, I'm not saying it's Amazon big, but in terms of the amount of people that work there and the amount of money that's generated, it is a pretty big business, and it's highly competitive. It's very cutthroat to try to win it all in college football. And so, it's a pretty big operation. And Saban, he has, I think what Nick Saban does really well is that he is very hands-on the things that he has to be hands-on about. And I think he's good at delegating the things that he doesn't have to be. And I think that's the challenge for any leader in any field, really, is what do you stay involved with to maintain the culture and maintain things being done to a certain standard? And what do you give up? What do you delegate that, because you don't have the time to do it, but also making sure that that person who's taking it over does it at a high level. And so that's something that he has to go through that I know, leaders of all kind have to kind of grapple with as well.
Oh yeah. So what does that kind of look like? Does he have a group of like really close confidants that like follow him around the hallways, or like, and then he goes to them and then they go to other people, or what is sort of that hierarchy like, if you know?
Yeah, there's definitely a clear hierarchy. And again, I think you have to almost look at it as like two different groups, because you have the players, which, kind of their own group, in which, so they're going to answer to his like assistant coaches, but they also kind of have their own leaders within the player group. So he has like a leadership committee, basically, of players, which he meets with weekly, in which it's a kind of a mix of different people, older players, younger players, stars, not stars, to try to get a good subsect of the team, which he talks to them and he'll ask them like, hey, like, what's going on with this? How are guys responding to our messages? All those different things. And then he'll give them messages that he wants to have enacted with the rest of the team. Then he has his assistant coaches. He's got, I think at this point, he's now got like multiple like special assistants, that are kind of like you said, a confidant type, or carrying out exactly what he wants done. And then he's got people outside the organization. His agent, this guy, Jimmy Sexton, who's pretty much the top agent of college football, someone he relies on a lot for advice, for opinions on coaches and players and stuff like that. So he's got a good mix of both people within his system and also outside that help him, come up with how he feels about things and can get things done for him.
And so what things have sort of changed? I'm sure it's a lot, but what things have sort of changed since he's been there in terms of his organization, or in terms of even the facilities and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so when he got to Alabama in 2007, I think now, just because we're on, entering year 16, and Alabama has been the dominant force in college football for the majority of his time there. We think of Alabama as just like they've always been great, because we can remember Bear Bryant too. When he came in Alabama, like, it was not a good situation. They had gone through multiple head coaches in a short time frame, had some massive scandals during that time frame. They were in trouble with the NCAA. So he wasn't walking into a situation that was like awesome, and their facilities had kind of fallen behind during that time frame. And they thought they kind of were living on their past. Like, we're Alabama. Like, of course, kids are going to want to come here. We don't need to invest in that. And he was pretty much the opposite of like, we need to do all these things if we want to get back to that level. And so we've seen a massive changes in facilities. The stadium has gone through multiple renovations, but his style has evolved during that time frame too. Just because, I was in college in 2007, and I think there's a massive difference between 2007 and 2022, just how kids, how they were raised, what they had growing up. I remember, having dial-up internet, and if your mom was on the phone, you had to like kick her off if you want to get on the internet. Like, kids today, like, they're getting tablets when they're little kids. And so he's had to evolve as a coach in order to reach a younger generation. And that's something that I think, again, I think a lot of businesses have struggled with. It's like millennials or Gen Z or whatever it is, like, and he's had to figure out ways to reach those people every single year, because, his players are all predominantly 18 to 23, so he's got to stay up with the times to figure out how to get those guys to, listen and buy into his culture and his strategies. So it's forced him to, kind of change a lot, I think, in many ways.
Oh yeah. And what, are there any differences in the way his program is structured compared to other top programs, or is it just like sheer force of will and talent or whatever that puts him above some of those other programs, or has he done things that they've had to sort of quickly follow suit or be left behind?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of people who have copied him. I think you've seen it with all of these different schools who have hired former Saban, proteges and disciples, just hoping they'll bring a little bit of that magic that he has. I've seen a lot of copying in terms of his recruiting strategies. He really popularized this thing called the analyst position, which he would hire basically former failed head coaches and bring them in at a reduced salary to just focus on, say, one thing. This guy might help us with third down strategy or whatever it might be. And nobody was doing that before him in college football. And now everybody does that. If you have the money to do it, at least. I think so. It's definitely a copycat league. And that's why I think what's been impressive is that he is always trying to innovate. He's always trying to evolve because I think he realizes like, if you get too stuck in your ways, that's how you fall behind, because there's always going to be somebody else trying to better you and try to figure out how you're doing things and do a little spin of their own on it. So I think I'm trying to think how they put it. I think the way that there's his famous thing is called the process. And I think the way they put it is like oft imitated, never duplicated, I think is how they say it. And so that's kind of the thing, is a lot of people are trying to do what they do, but nobody does it clearly to the level that they do. Sure. And is able to maintain it the way that they do.
That's fascinating. So how has he responded and Bama responded to like all the NIL changes and the, conference realignment? Are they just sort of adapting and moving in that direction and to win that in that environment? And if so, maybe what kinds of things are they doing or changing?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to, and I think so. I think what we saw with year one, and some of this was based on just, what's interesting about NIL is that, like, for a long time, still really every state can have its own laws. And so this is why you've seen people asking for Congress to have just kind of one national law. And so some states were able to some schools in some states were able to do more, but Alabama, based on its laws it had in the books year one, limited some of what they could do. But in general, I think Alabama took a more conservative approach in year one. And I think that's typical of Saban. I don't think he wanted to do anything too wild year one. I think he takes let's sit back for a second and see what this landscape is. And I think there've been some well-publicized comments he's made about other schools and how they went about things. It's obvious he realized, okay, the spirit of what this was supposed to be is not what's happening now. And so we either need to adapt and start playing that game, or we're going to fall behind. And so I've noticed, just anecdotally, it seems like Alabama's NIL game is stepping up. They're doing more things creatively. They're doing, I think they had a first of its kind deal of Fanatics, which I thought was interesting. Alabama's always been really good at adapting under Saban. He might take that first year to take a step back and not go all in, but once he gets a chance to see a little bit of the data and see how things are moving, he'll embrace it and he'll find a way to do it that is better than anybody else. And we've seen that time and time again during his time at Alabama.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, is there anything we, don't know about Saban, or any criticisms, or sort of, is there like another side to the coin? Obviously he's the most successful coach ever. And, that's the brunt of the story, but is there another side? Is there criticisms? Is there, staff run through, or does it, most of it work pretty well?
It's not an easy environment, and I think that's been a key part of their success. But I would say also, you will run through some people when you're having such a grueling pace, I think, day to day. That is something that I think if there is a complaint, that's what people point to. Especially, it's hard on the players. It's even harder on the coaches, from everything that I've, all the people I talked to for this book. And so, if you're not wired a certain way, you might not enjoy it. I think one of Butch Jones, the former Tennessee coach, put it to me as Nick Saban is the pace car of that entire operation. And he's going at a fast pace, right? And so if you're going to try to meet that pace, which everybody, of course, wants to do, that's just very difficult. And you just might not be built to do that all day, every day for years. And so I do think it leads to maybe a little bit more turnover. But I also think, pretty much every single person I talked to was it was worth it. There was always a payoff for it. It just wasn't always the most fun environment to be in. But, on the flip side of that, I remember asking a player about practice, and he was like, yeah, practice was awful. It was so grueling and day in and out, nobody really liked it. And I was what's the payoff then? And he's like, winning is really fun. That's the fun part is you win, and if that's what you value the most, you're going to love it. It's just that day to day is tough. And again, if you're not wired in a way to handle that, it's going to be a challenging environment for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's sort of what it takes to win at that level year after year.
Takes what it takes,
Yeah.
And I think they realize that.
Yeah. So what do you think the future looks like? How long is Saban going to be that pace car? what does Alabama look like in the next, 5, 10 years? What do you have any thoughts on that, or your guess is, it's just a guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I feel like Nick Saban, he clearly is at the tail end of his career, right? He's going to coach less moving forward than he has in the past. He coached like 50 years, and he'll turn 71 on Halloween Day. And so I can just tell based on some of the public comments he's made, I know it's getting used against him in recruiting. I can tell that people are talking about, oh, Saban's not going to be there, because he's been pretty forceful in the last couple of months, talking about how like he's not retiring anytime soon. He still loves it, all these different things. And to me, I think the way you put that is important. I think the moment he feels like he can't be the pace car anymore is when he's going to want to walk away, because he knows what it takes. He knows what it takes, a daily commitment to be competing at the highest level. And if he doesn't, in my opinion, if he feels like he can't do that anymore, that's when he'll walk away. So I don't see it as he's not a results guy. And so he's not going to retire after a national championship. He's not going to retire after one bad season. I think it's going to be much more internal of, you know what, like I love practice, but like I don't want to go to practice today. That to me, I think would be like a really scary realization for him. And like, maybe this is not, I can't do this anymore. Or like, I don't want to have to fly out to do this, thing that I have to do. Like he's so good at doing what it takes every day that if he feels like he can't do it, that's when he walks away. So could be a year from now, it could be 10. I mean, we'll see how he holds up, but that's, to me, that'll be the sign.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really interesting way to put it, because it is, I think most people from the outside think, okay, if he wins, then he goes home, or if he wins another one, then he goes home. But, like you said, maybe he's not results driven, and it's more of that internal knowing, can you do it every day? Do you enjoy it every day?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that he loves the most is like practice and things like that. He loves the slow, gradual process of attaining perfection, and of course you can never achieve it. So he's always had something to do with it, but like, I think he enjoys a national championship. He of course enjoys it for his players and all of his staffers and all the things that people put into to accomplishing that goal. But that's not what drives him. And again, we've seen time and time again, and I write about this in the book, like he turns the page like right away, and there's a couple of stories in the book, like the day after a national championship, like he's calling a meeting and he's yelling at people about how they've fallen behind in different areas. He's not living large off of his accomplishments. And so retiring after a national championship game, like that's the Disney ending. It might be how I'd want to go out, but that's just not how he's wired at all. Like that's, just not the way he thinks about things.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything you want to add? Maybe any other points you might want to add?
No, I think I've enjoyed it. I think that, I'll give you my little sales pitch here to
Sure.
people.
Yeah.
I think it's something that it should appeal to a lot of different people. It was funny. I had a book launch party recently, and there are Auburn fans there, LSU fans, and I was like, why are you here? And they're like, because like, I so respect what this guy does. I just want to know a little bit more about how does he do it, and so I think clearly Alabama fans love this book. College football fans are going to love this book. But I think just in general, if you're looking for like how to improve your daily life, maybe by 1%, or if you're just curious of like, how does this incredibly successful leader build and sustain this like incredibly successful organization, I think there's a lot of that in this book. So I think some people, you get, oh, it's just a sports book. Oh, it's this, like, it's a lot of things. And I've just heard already from different people in different areas where like, I don't even care about college football, but like I read your book and I loved it, And so that to me has been the most exciting part, is that it's not just one thing for one person.
Oh, sure. That's awesome. And where can people get it? I assume Amazon, the normal spots, or
everywhere you buy books, man. Yeah. Amazon, I feel like that's where a lot of people buy books. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. If your local bookstore might have it. So lots of different places you can get it, and, get it out to you pretty soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thanks so much for coming on. You're welcome back anytime. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I enjoyed it.